say that in this country we should have a minimum wage that is a living wage? Is it left to say that everybody should have health care as a right? Is it left to say that we have to address the crisis of climate change?
I think when you do this, you're really smart, by the way. Again, it's all wrapped in this morality play, is it not, Victor? Even though this economy is a broad-based recovery, especially blue-collar workers finally getting their wages going up, finally having more opportunities, frankly, because of Trump's policies.
Yeah, the minimum wage is irrelevant now because people can't find workers, and they're driving wages up as it should be in a competitive economy that works. But Bernie Sanders is sort of like a court jester. He can say all this stuff because he owns 3 homes. His wife did pretty well as a college president. Pretty well is kind of a euphemism. And it's the same with all of these candidates. They all say they're socialists, but they're sort of like the court jester that made fun of the king. They make fun of capitalism with the understanding that they have a Malibu estate if you're a Hollywood star, or if you're an endowed professor, you live in a pretty good neighborhood. And that's how it works. But the only difference is now that apparently a lot of people take this seriously because I think on our side, Laura, we have been so successful and created the greatest level of affluence and prosperity in civilization's history. We didn't take the time to explain how it all happened.
Yeah, lazy and
educating. And they see all this wealth. We haven't educated them. We haven't stood up to them either.
Hey, Victor, I want to ask you,
and tried to challenge them.
Yeah, challenge them, put it on trial, as Larry Kudlow said. I completely agree with you. We're going to get into that a little bit later on in the show, how this can expand, this movement can expand, certainly not contract. But as you know, Victor, democracy dies in the darkness, or at least at 5:15 p.m. on a Friday, because that's when the Washington Post slyly posted an editor's note to its initial coverage of the Covington kids debacle from February. Now, the student at the center of the controversy, Nick Sandmann, is suing the Post, as you know, for $250 million. Tonight, the Post saying, quote, subsequent reporting, a student's statement, and additional video allow for a more complete assessment of what occurred, either contradicting or failing to confirm accounts provided in that story. Oh, that is a weak editor's note. Sandmann's attorney, Lynn Wood, responded simply, too little, too late. Victor, do you agree?
Yeah, I think I do, and it shows you the value of deterrence. If somebody had have done that in the George Zimmerman trial, remember when they photoshopped his pictures, or they edited the 9/11 tape, or the Duke lacrosse, or the Kavanaugh matter, or the Jussie Smollett, if there had been consequences for making things up, then we'd see this type of reaction. But I guess the threat of losing $250 million deters them now suddenly post facto. But that's what you need to happen. You have to have consequences for lying and for fantasies and fabrication.
No, we got to take them to court, make them pay. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you so much. And tonight, there's finally an arrest in that brutal attack on a conservative volunteer on the campus of UC Berkeley. February 19th, Hayden Williams went to recruit conservative students, and this was the response. Well, it took police 10 days to arrest this man, who is clearly identifiable to anyone who knows him. 28-year-old Zachary Greenberg faces assault and battery charges. Here now for an Ingraham Angle exclusive is that victim, Hayden Williams, and his attorney, Harmeet Dillon. Hayden, how you doing?
I've been better, but I'm recovering and all right.
Yeah, you can look at me. Okay. That's all right. You don't do a lot of TV. We really appreciate your joining us, by the way. Hearing that punch to the face, I mean, anyone who's been punched in the face, like whether you were a little kid or an adult, it hurts. Why did it take so long to find this guy?
Well, I think due process was being followed, which I appreciate that as a constitutional conservative myself. But, you know, I'm grateful that the police did their job and found this guy. But I remain disappointed with UC Berkeley and the fact that they allowed such a culture of intolerance and violence toward conservative viewpoints to grow at Berkeley and even thrive, really.
I think it was an attempt to say, don't try this again, Harmeet. You've represented a lot of people who've been treated terribly just for their viewpoints.
Exactly so.
And what's the next step here?
Well, the next step is that now that he's been arrested, the facts and the investigation get turned over to the prosecutor's office in Alameda County, and they will decide what charges to bring. We've been told, and the bail is set for one count of a felony assault with great bodily harm. As you can see, Hayden has still got a bruise on his face almost 2 weeks after the fact. Now, in previous incidents of great bodily harm assaults on the campus, these incidents have usually been pled out, and the felony charges are often dismissed to a misdemeanor and no time is served. So that's going to be my concern right now, is to make sure that this is treated with the seriousness.
Are you going to file a lawsuit, a civil suit against this guy?
Well, the civil suit usually trails. We don't want to get in the way of the criminal process, and so I think that's really number one. But number two, he appears to be somebody who has a history at UC Berkeley. He's somebody who has worked for the campus for a period of months and also audited classes there. And as Hayden said, it is common for these Antifa-type thugs and people who don't look like Antifa, like this guy, to float around, menace people, throw punches. My clients who are UC Berkeley undergrads have experienced this many times.
Hayden, is this going to stop you from being involved in conservative politics on campus or off?
No, this is only serving to embolden me and reinforce the idea that Leadership Institute and campus reform, that their mission is as important now as ever.
Well, maybe take a little taekwondo, too. I mean, you get hit in the face, you know. I mean, that's a bad deal.
That guy is like twice the size of Hayden, and you know, 10 years.
And do like a little roundhouse kick to the side of the head, knock him down.
Wasn't the first time he did it.
No. This is, but it's meant to intimidate. This is meant to tell any conservative across the country, don't try this again, because what happened to this young man is going to happen to you. Imagine if it's a young woman.
That's right. Who
wanted to be on campus.
That's right.
Thank you for being here. We really, really appreciate it, and I'm glad you're okay.
Thanks for having me.
And Harmeet, thanks for representing him.
Thanks, Laura.
Coming up, the worst media offenders of the week. The Ingraham angle has got its eyes on you. Plus, National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow wants socialism to be put on trial. He joins us later in the hour to start. And we'll bring you some of the most outrageous examples each week. And joining me now, we do it every Friday, is Jeffrey Lord, former CNN commentator and contributing editor for The American Spectator, and author of the forthcoming book, Swamp Wars, can't wait, along with Tammy Bruce, Fox News contributor and president of Independent Women's Voice. All right, let's begin, guys, with how the Democrats so casually throw around charges of racism.
I don't really think that the president sees black people as fully human. I don't think he sees us as having agency, intelligence, as noted by his comment about Spike. He wishes he could read. There's always some subtle suggestion that black people need to catch up.
And then the godfather of anti-racism, of course, had to put his 2 cents in, Al Sharpton, today.
Spike Lee makes a acceptance speech at the Oscars and say, do the right thing in 2020, and the president says he's talking race, he's a racist.
And
he didn't even mention race.
Whether he can read.
He didn't even mention race. They're obsessed with race because that's who they are.
Now, Tammy, does Sharpton have any credibility in talking about someone being too obsessed with race?
Yeah, obviously. He is the man effectively who created this framework of using it really as a weapon. But what's fascinating is we did see an example of racism, I think, that nobody is calling this out. When Representative Tlaib called Lynn Patton at the Cohen hearing a prop, that was the removal of her humanity, not just agency. And it tends to be used against women of color, is this nature of women being something other than human, little less than human, and that was in front of the world. So this is an extraordinary dynamic. It's, of course, also projection, considering the fact that there's been one president who has done extraordinary work for all communities of color as he lifts up this economy. That's on the record, and of course, it's a fact-based framework. I don't think Al Sharpton can claim that.
Jeff.
Al Sharpton, whom I have on tape and published this years ago, where he's calling a politician, I can't say the word on to the N-word, this, that, and the other thing, and he's using this in public.
What politician?
It was David Dinkins. And he said he thought he was the only blank, blank, blank in New York. I mean, it's just appalling stuff. He does this all of the time. It's anti-Semitic in addition, with all sorts of things, telling Jews to put their yarmulke on and come to his house, and he'll...
No, I mean, how can we even take this seriously? I mean, I'm glad he lost a lot of weight, but other than that,
it denigrates everyone.
Yeah, we gotta move on. All right, second on the list. Listen to what MSNBC's Donnie Deutsch is accusing the president of getting ready to do.
He did it in the last election. When he thought he was going to lose, he was teeing it up for a few days. I mean, it's easy to forget that now. If impeachment starts to happen, even if he loses an election, whatever in a movie you think this guy is capable of doing to create a civil war, he will do. I know I'm not speaking in hyperbole.
Civil war, Jeff.
They thought that if Donald Trump lost the election, he was going to do all sorts of things. They lost the election and have invented this whole Trump-Russia collusion. And there's a civil war because of that, and it's the fault of the American left, and this is what they do. This is who they are. And it's part and parcel of everything you've been talking about the last few days, socialism, etc. So, I mean, this is Trump derangement syndrome.
They're deeply unhappy people. For all the people with all this money, man, they're unhappy people.
Yes.
I'm like, where do I go to CPAC? Everyone's having a great time. Like,
right.
This is like the best the economy's been in decades. This is like, kick up your heels. And these are the good old days. Tammy.
Yeah, they're miserable, but this is what the left always does as well. They rely on divisions, on keeping people away from each other. It's the only thing that guarantees them votes, is to make people afraid. And it really is effectively a Cold War at this point, turning hot when you're dealing with hoax, hate crimes, etc. But the American people, I think, recognize this, and the president's remaining steady, and I think that's helpful as well.
And as usual, when he doesn't get his own way, Jim Acosta embarrasses himself, as he did yesterday, whining because President Trump didn't call on him during the press conference in Hanoi, Vietnam. Poor baby. And he again took a swipe at Trump's reality TV past.
The president steered clear largely during this news conference of the White House press corps and was instead selecting journalists at random from the other side of the room. At times he was calling on reporters from Russian state media, Chinese state media. He didn't want to really answer the questions about Michael Cohen. The president staked a lot of his presidency on something that is just much more difficult than reality TV. This is not something that can be wrapped up in a season of The Apprentice.
That's like 20 seconds too long from him. But look, he's upset. The president did call on, I believe, NPR, Washington Post, Bloomberg, but just didn't call on him.
Right. And the thing that got me last night, Laura, was you mentioned this. You ran through by name the media outlets that were called on by the president. And yet he goes after you as if you never said it. And I'm thinking to myself as I see this, Jim, go to the videotape, please. Pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to be, I'm not an impartial journalist. I'm an analyst, a commentator, a host. He's actually posing as a journalist, and he despises this president. And it gets in the way of, maybe he could do some good reports. He has no sense of humor, and most people in the press corps don't like him, as far as I can tell.
It's the ultimate reality television show. It's the ultimate framework of presenting something that's fake and pretending that it's real. But nobody went to Hanoi to answer questions about the circus of Michael Cohen. Right. That's not why they were there, and I'm glad the president stuck to his guns on that.
What does the CNN really think of him, Jeff?
They like him the best that I could see. I liked him when I was there. But I just have to say, I mean, truly, I think.
But he's become more self-obsessed, hasn't he?
Yeah,
he wasn't this self-obsessed a few years ago, was he? I don't know what's going on.
It seems like Trump derangement syndrome has just overwhelmed the place. And, you know, it's too bad because there are a lot of serious, good journalists there.
Well, a lot of attention makes people lose their mindset.
All right. Phenomenal. In the media week, the worst of the media, guys. Thanks so much. And reporters attacked on live TV. We got a lot coming up. Wild, wild Friday Follies and Larry Kudlow coming up. It's Friday Follies. And tonight's theme, interrupting business as usual. Joining us now with all the details, Raymond Arroyo, Fox News contributor, New York Times bestselling author of the brand new phenomenal book, Will Wilder and the Amulet of Power. Raymond. All right, there were a few high-profile examples of reporters getting more than they bargained for in the field. So what happened?
Yeah, there are a couple of these examples we'll run through this week. At the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, reporter Chris Grover was live at a Toronto comedy club this week when behind him, actor Boyd Banks approached and watch.
They are hoping that this town hall will stop this transition to Just for Laughs from happening, but things are getting a little awkward out here, so I'm going to pass it back to you.
What a jerk.
That is disgusting.
He breathed on his neck. He nibbled on his ear. He now has come out with a statement, Banks, the actor.
First of all, it's an assault.
Says,
can't you immediately defend yourself?
Well, I would think you could pop the guy in the mouth. He says he needs treatment for his mental health issues. Now, this happens far more frequently than people are aware. A reporter, he filed a police report, and Banks, the actor with the active tongue, he claims that he's guilty for everything, and like Smollett, he has mental health issues, apparently.
No. Okay.
That's the convenient go-to
basic
ploy.
manners issues.
It's ridiculous. Now, Laura, there are some journalists who pick up things they never intended, not only creeps like this guy. Ed O'Keefe over at CBS this week was posted outside the Cohen hearing room, and an unaware young man didn't know he was live on TV.
Anticipate actually winning the job. And you can sit there and say, yeah, but this is an uncredible witness because he had been saying one thing just a few months ago.
I can hear
he really, oh my gosh, and he starts to run.
I can hear a friend of mine saying, Americans eat in public like this, like in an open...
Awful. But you know, Laura, sadly, too many people think that reporters are their playthings because they see them on TV, so they engage, they either relax around them, or they think they can do these silly things where they touch them or hit them or punch them. My hero, my all-time hero, when it comes to hazing in the field and dealing with these hazers, is our own Mike Tobin. Note the smooth technique.
10 seconds later, the second explosion goes off, according to the FBI, at the location where he dropped his. Please don't do that. Where he dropped his knapsack.
How did I not know
I love the
that?
double hand. He did the double. Please don't do that without missing a beat. And he goes right on.
Don't mess with Mike Tobin.
No,
he's strong. But
He's
anyone
on
comes up to you and touch you, you can just do a quick elbow.
Well, if they touch you, once they touch you, you can smack back.
No. That doesn't. All
Academy Award winner Jennifer Lawrence, Laura, stars in a new film called Unbreaking America. I don't know about the grammar there, but we'll take it. It is a celebrity PSA that is supposed to acquaint the audience with the corruption in the government and what they can do about it.
How do we unrig this system? I'm obsessed with this idea. As you can see here, nearly half of American voters are now registered independent. And then there's gerrymandering, with politicians drawing the boundaries of their own voting districts into crazy shapes. But it all adds up to this vast ring of influence over our elected leaders. It's a corrupt system in which we, the people, have near zero influence over our own government. And that is sad. That is not the country I feel like I grew up in.
Well, what country did you think you grew up in? She claims there's only corruption now. She's 28 years old.
She's only 28 years old. I mean, Watergate was in the 70s.
Here's what she's actually advocating. She's advocating a bill, an anti-corruption bill, okay? And it's pretty radical. This group, Represent US, Represent Us, wants to ban candidates from accepting lobbyist money. They want to end gerrymandering. They want automatic voter registration and at-home voting, Laura. And they'd like to overthrow the Electoral College.
Yeah, of course.
This Ending Corruption Act is actually itself an act of corruption.
But she says there's a silver lining in that playbook.
Well, it looks more to me like an American Hustle.
No can do. Game of Thrones. Is that what she was in?
No, Hunger Games. Hunger Games.
Whatever. All right. In the United Kingdom, there's a young woman, Marie Claire Springham, who's trying to shake parenting up with her new chest feeding kit, so men can breastfeed their offspring.
The tissue is actually there. It's just dormant. 6 weeks before the birth, they start taking a drug called domperidone. I designed this first as an empathy tool. I was looking at postnatal depression, and I learned so much, particularly that it occurs in men. And the main cause of that is the feeling of being left out.
Now, Laura, the kit comes with a breast pump for men and a compression shirt, actually a bra for the guys, because there are 2 rounds of drugs needed to induce, they think, lactation. Here's the problem. A man has, according to the paraphernalia here, B-cup breasts he could achieve using this protocol. Now, what man wants to have that? So he's going to run around in a compression shirt with B-cup breasts and express milk. I'm sorry. They're claiming that
You're very intolerant.
They claim men felt left out of the parenting process. bathe your child, read to your child, walk with your child. You are a parent. You do not need to take the mother's prerogative here. I mean, give me a break. This is really.
By the way, I did this.
I was offended by
I did this in 2005 or 6 on my radio show with Lee Habib and Matt Fox.
Yeah, but yours was about men who spontaneously lactated.
That's a whole separate segment. We'll do that next week.
Okay.
No, men will like have wet shirts suddenly. Oh, no.
Please.
All
Yeah,
right. They're telling me I got to get out of this segment. All right.
Please.
It was a speech that sent shockwaves through the entire 2020 Democrat field. Up next, President Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, joins me to expand on his powerful anti-socialism denunciations.
I ask you to join President Trump and me and the rest to put socialism on trial and convict it. Tax the rich, tax wealth. Wealthy, successful people don't pay their fair share. I'm hearing that again. Thought I put that to bed 30 years ago.
Yes, it's like Freddy Krueger. It just keeps coming back with that message. Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, not only brought the House down at CPAC, but he sent a warning shot to the 2020 Democrats. Capitalism, the free market, or die. Mock as you may, but a new poll finds that nearly 2/3 of registered voters believe that the Democratic Party supports socialism, and the party has given Americans good reason to feel that way. Here now to expand on that message, Larry Kudlow himself. Nice job.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
Oh, it was
Appreciate
great.
it very much.
You worked for Reagan.
Yes.
I worked for Reagan right out of college, and I can't believe this is how the Democrats are answering this booming economy with, let's do socialism.
Yes.
Why did they do this? Why is this the path they're taking?
Well, they've been moving left. It's an odd story. I agree with you. You'd think they might learn from our success. I was watching a very dear friend, Austin Goolsbee, who was an Obama economist, and he's a smart guy, and even he's defending this stuff, and it's wrong. You know, it's funny. At the very moment when things are turning up the last couple of years, and the new set of policies of tax cuts and deregulation and opening up energy, and we're getting 3% growth, and blue-collar workers are flourishing for the first time in 20 years, and men and women are buying small businesses again, they come along with this. So it's an act of desperation. It's not going to work, but my message to CPAC is a simple one. We have to put socialism on trial. We have to challenge it. We have to rebut it. We have to put pencil to paper to show what it's going to do to the economy. We have to deal with the moral dimensions of it. And then we must convict socialism. And we should not wait. Do not let this fester. Let's get going right now, and let's do it in a way that's serious. This is a teachable moment, in my opinion, and some of the polls show that people much prefer capitalism to socialism. But that is our task ahead, and it's not just about this election. It's about the whole future of the country.
Well, I want to get into what I think President Trump could do from now through the 2020 election to try to convince people who might not know about all the wonders of capitalism about why they're going down the wrong path. So I want to talk about that in a moment. But I want to share something with one of your dear friends, Paul Krugman, said today.
Absolutely.
Nobel Prize-winning economist, and the economist to the elites on the left. And he's talking about the recent surge in socialism. He said a significant number of voters, including a majority of voters under 30, say they approve of socialism. What Americans who claim to support socialism actually want is what the rest of the world calls social democracy. A market economy, but with extreme hardship limited by a strong social safety net and extreme inequality limited by progressive taxation. They want us to look like Denmark or Norway, not Venezuela.
Yes.
You care to take that on?
I do, because I heard this in the campaign from Senator Sanders a couple years ago.
He's saying it again.
And what is so interesting, if you actually go back and look, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Holland, have all pulled back from this great social democracy they talk about because they weren't growing and unemployment was high. So they cut back on regulations, they lowered their corporate taxes, they lowered their income taxes, they're now growing. The countries that used to be behind the Iron Curtain, let's take Poland as a perfect example, let's take the Baltics as a perfect example, they're running free market capitalist economies. On the other side, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, they are using the old Soviet-style model. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of these Democrats are going back or want to consciously go back to the Soviet Union. That's not my point. My point is, however, when you start talking about a centrally planned and centrally controlled government-run economies, okay?
State-owned enterprises.
It could be. When you start going down that road, and can I just get my little Trump quote in here, because he did this in the State of the Union. Socialism promises prosperity, but it delivers poverty. That's the state running.
But it's wealth inequality. It's income inequality. It's lifestyle inequality. And it's being packaged in this beautiful, beautiful presentation of fairness, Larry. It's going to be back to the why is it fair that Steve Schwarzman is making $598 million from Blackstone this year? So it's back to that. And at colleges, as you and I know, they're being spoon-fed this drivel about social democracies, and even though they're being wiped out across Europe, social democratic
1% of the taxpayers pay 40% of the tax burden. 10%, top 10%, pay 70%. Okay, the bottom 50% of taxpayers don't pay any taxes, 3 or 4%. Now, when you live in a prosperous time, those arguments will fail. Because, again, socialism and big state government run is a poverty trap. But we have to make that case. We have to say, look, you want this Green New Deal? So that means you can't travel, can't get in a car, can't get in an
Storytelling is always problematic for people normally comfortable with charts and decimal points and numbers.
You run
storytelling.
You run a family farm, you're not going to be able to run the family farm because of overregulation.
Okay, hold that thought because we have a lot more to get. You're sticking around for another segment.
Thank you.
Never happens.
Appreciate
He's
it.
here.
Appreciate it.
And when we come back, I'm going to unveil my proposal for what the administration can do ahead of the 2020 election. So what is it? Stay there.
Wall Street's fine, Main Street not so much. That's a very select group who are benefiting.
Despite what President Trump says, this is not a hot economy.
Why? The Obama economy for the first part of the presidency. He's still riding it.
Right.
Back with me, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow. Larry, this is like candy to a baby. This is so easy, but go ahead, Larry.
Just a factoid on this nonsense. We just scored 3.1% growth. That is the best performance since, 13, 15 years. On the issue of the rich and so forth, this is a blue-collar recovery, and the
Even the Washington Post had to admit that in September, October.
Actually, my pal Heather Long, a great reporter for the Washington Post.
I'm reading.
She absolutely did it. Rhodes Scholar, good for her. This is a blue-collar recovery. It's the best job performance in the blue collars. They are also, their wages are rising faster than white-collar wages. Do not tell me that this is just a rich person's economy. It is absolutely not. This is what we saw with Reagan, and it also continued in the 90s. More or less, but we haven't seen it in 20 years.
I know the boat builders, guys I've talked to down in Florida, like, the people are now getting their boats completely refitted. It's like 10 years ago, it was, well, no, it's a little too expensive. Now they're like, do the whole thing over. He said, this guy says it trickles down to me.
People are coming off unemployment. They are people who've been out of the labor force.
But this is lunacy.
Are coming back into the labor force.
They're selling snake oil. I mean, I'm going to be honest. It's a lie. What they're saying is a lie. And so let's go to the point. And I want to get to Krugman first, then the point that I want to raise with you. Paul Krugman in November 9th, 2016, president wins the election, historic, and he predicts a global recession. Okay, yeah, a global recession. The Nobel Prize just got more and more diminished. Then fast forward 2 weeks ago, he's basically saying a version of the same thing. He says, "Well, it's pretty likely over the next 2 years that we're gonna deal with a recession." So it is doom and gloom. We're the happy party now. We're like, we can do anything. They are the doom and gloomers. Period.
Growth and prosperity and jobs bring happiness, Laura. That's not a small part. That's why I think the Democrats are making a political mistake. They're dealing with an environment of recession. We're now moving into a new environment of prosperity. Look, this debate, socialism, capitalism, this is freedom and opportunity versus statism
and control
and regulation and control. Governments don't produce anything, okay? Government should be there as a safety net for the poor. But let me make this point. Governments don't produce. What Trump has done, he has ended the war on success. He has ended the war on businesses. He has restored incentives. So you work the extra hour. You make the extra investment.
You get to keep it.
You make
but
the
we
risk
still have
higher.
a problem,
You
Larry.
can keep
We still
it.
have a problem. You know, and my idea is that the president and a couple of friends of mine were thinking about this. The president gives a series of historic speeches on the tenets of this pro-growth economic revival, miracle, conservatism in action. And you actually, it's like a fireside chat without you don't have to do the fireplace, but a really serious series of speeches for all those young people who aren't getting that education because just the colleges and universities
this is great.
are antagonistic toward those ideas.
This is a teachable moment. I love that because I think it needs to be done seriously and not condescendingly.
And not as a rally, not as a rally,
My hero,
as a serious series
My hero,
of
Winston
talks.
Churchill, used to always say this. If you're in your 20s and you're not a socialist, you have no heart. If you're in your 30s and you're not a capitalist, you have no mind. These kids are now moving up into the workforce. They are working, and they will learn about incentives and rewards and opportunities.
And we need them to learn by 2020.
And freedom. Well, you know, you're right.
We gotta go.
The results will show, but I don't want to make it just about a political election. This is
That's
a
about the country.
long-run battle.
This is about what's good for the country.
And
freedom and prosperity versus control and picking your pocket to give money to other
life, liberty, and the pursuit.
Happy voters.
of happiness.
I told the
That's
president
where we need to go.
happy voters.
And that's
in 2020.
that's a moral statement. We have that freedom and we must keep it.
It's God-given.
And America will